What if there was one thing that you could change to make a massive difference in the effectiveness and direction of your life? What if, rather than spending a great deal of time managing your habits and your actions, you could spend just a little time changing your perspective and make quantum leap changes in your life? The perspective that we have has the power to completely change the makeup and direction of our lives. Sometimes a change in perspective is referred to as a paradigm shift. Well, Jesus talks about the same thing, although he definitely doesn't refer to it as a paradigm shift. But he does talk about the way that you and I see the world and what kind of an impact that has on our lives. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moths nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So then, if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. That passage came from Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. And what Jesus is talking about here is whether our eyes are good or bad. Our eyes, or the way we see the world, our perspective, makes such a huge difference that he says it's the difference between our lives being full of light, being radiant and shining, and our lives being cloaked in darkness, to the point that the brightest thing that we've got is still darkness. Now, right before he's talking about our eyesight, how we see the world, he talks about treasure. Specifically, he's comparing and he's contrasting two kinds of treasure: earthly treasure and heavenly treasure. Now, what he says is that the earthly treasure, as we know, it fades away. It gets destroyed. It wears down. It gets stolen. Heavenly treasure doesn't fade away. It doesn't get destroyed. It can't be stolen. But what he's really talking about here is a difference in perspective, a difference in focus. Now, you look at these two things, and he's not really talking about the seeking of the treasure itself. In fact, the entire Sermon on the Mount, he's not talking about physical actions so much as he is talking about what's in the heart. And here he mentions the heart as well. Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, I believe that this statement can be reversed. Where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. We don't start out with a pile of treasure and decide that's where we're going to put our heart. We start with our hearts, which are admittedly bent a little away from what God's purpose and what his will for us is. So we tend to deviate a bit, and our hearts go a little bit astray. And where our hearts go, that's where we're going to start amassing our treasures. We don't start with the treasure. We start with the heart, and the heart amasses treasure wherever it goes. So in many ways, this statement could be reversed. Where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. Now, this is a perspective change, because we could read this verse and we could say, let's focus on making sure our treasure is in the right place. So, then what do? We start maybe getting rid of a lot of our earthly possessions, not buying so much. We try to become minimalists of some type. We tend to only focus on what is spiritual, what is up above, and we get rid of all of our physical things. Well, we could do that. We could try to get rid of all of our things. But if we just focused on that, our heart wouldn't change necessarily. Now, it may change with time, but we could begrudgingly get rid of all of our physical gifts pretty easily. What we need to do, though, is change the heart. Rather than focusing on getting rid of everything or building up a new treasure, we want to focus on developing a heart that desires the right kind of treasure. Now, that journey is by nature going to involve us doing some actions as well. We can't get away from doing some of the actions. But if we focus on the heart first, on the perspective, on getting our heart into the place where we desire heavenly treasure, we desire to do God's will, to obey his commands, to love people, to love God, then the rest is going to come by nature. We're going to start amassing that kind of treasure, and we're going to look around us one day and see, this doesn't matter as much to me anymore. This stuff, this house, these possessions, it doesn't matter as much anymore. I don't care about it quite as much because I care about something else even more. So you see, this shift in perspective is the difference between doing a lot of work for some change and doing the real, sometimes hard work, but I believe less work in the end, and having massive change and ultimately getting where we actually want to be. We want to do the work that is required to change our hearts, not the work that is required to change every aspect of our living. Every aspect of our being is just too much if our heart is the same, and we're ultimately going to give up. We need to change the heart first. Our perspective needs to be right. In fact, I encourage you, go back and read the entire chapter of Matthew 6. He's talking kind of compare and contrast like this the whole way, Jesus is. He's comparing where we're getting our reward from. Is it people or is it God? The Pharisees, the hypocrites, as he also calls them in this chapter, they're getting their reward from other people, from being seen, from being noticed, from being honored. And they're doing what they can to get more attention from those sources, from people. And he keeps urging again and again, no. Do it in a way that people don't notice it as much, so that your God still sees it. Because God, your Father who is in heaven, sees what is done in secret. So you don't have to make a big show about it. You get your heart in the right place. You get your reward from the right place. And how you deal with prayer or with giving to the poor or fasting or any of that stuff is going to be right. If you're focusing simply on the action, you could do it for a very wrong reason. This really applies with our goals as well. With our podcast, episode 24 with Matthew, he talks about that, where even before we start focusing on what our goals are going to be, what we want to do, what our plans are, we need to make sure we have that roadmap. We need to make sure we have our purpose in mind. What do we really want to accomplish? What is our broader goal in life, And then we base all of our other goals off of that. And if our perspective is right, if we're seeing the world right, then our biggest, number one goal that everything else feeds into is glorifying God, the pursuit of God. And everything else is connected to that. Again, get your perspective right. Start seeing the world right. And the rest will follow. Verse 24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. This is just kind of a repeat. In fact, he continues with the end of the chapter. He's just talking through the same points. You cannot have two masters. You got to choose. And what your heart is, what your perspective is, that's ultimately going to make the choice. That's ultimately going to make the choice for you, right? So what we need to be doing as Christians is we need to be evaluating our perspectives. How do we see these things? Where are our real priorities? Where do these things line up? And what we really need to do is make sure that our perspective, that our goals, that our priorities are eternal in focus. We get caught up a lot in the day-to-day, and that's natural because that's where we're living right now. But the day-to-day is going to end. Just like the earthly treasure, we're going to end. Today is going to end. Everything is going to end. We got to have that eternal focus so that no matter what happens around us, even when we die, we'll be in the right place. And it's interesting because what Jesus starts talking about in the next chapter is continuing kind of along the line of perspective. It's talking about people who have specks or logs in their eyes. So what you need to be doing is you need to evaluate your perspectives all the time. You need to be evaluating what do you really value in life? What are your real goals and priorities? Are they eternal or are they physical? Are they temporary? You need to be evaluating these things because it is very easy to get complacent and get sidetracked and think that we're doing the right thing and think that we're on the right path when actually we are drifting. We are being pulled away by different desires, by bent desires away from God. We need to be evaluating these things. It's too easy to fall astray. So my question to you is, again, what if there was one thing you could change that can make a massive difference in the effectiveness and direction of your life? Well, there is. It's your perspective. It's how you see the world. And the way you change that is, well, by evaluating it and also by soaking yourself in the right perspective. I look around. You can look around too. The world's a pretty dark place. And there are a lot of people right now who don't have hope, who are struggling with anxiety and depression and all kinds of terrible things. And they have no way of dealing with those. We as Christians, we have a way to deal with it. It doesn't mean we live painless lives. Sometimes we live painful or maybe even more painful lives. But we have a way to deal with that. We have a perspective. We have that light filling our bodies that heals us and keeps us on the right path. But the world around us, their bodies are full of darkness because their eyes aren't seeing the right way. We want to make sure not only that we aren't like that, but that we are shining the light and bringing the light to those people. Because every once in a while, they'll catch a glimmer of that. And you never know what that's going to do. So my urge to you, evaluate your perspectives. Find just one way that you can make your perspective a little more eternal. That you could focus a little bit less on right now and a little bit more on eternity. That will have massive effect and pay massive dividends in your life as you strive to live more fully for Christ. That is what it means to be salty in a way. I'm not talking about the angry, mean, bitter kind of salty. I am talking about the good kind where we are focused and we're full of light and we are the lights of the world. That is the kind of salty that you want to be. It starts right now.